Welcome to the sixth episode of Seven Leadership Practices for the Soul. These practices develop our leadership from the inside out. Last episode, we discussed the importance of receiving God's love to grow as a leader. This week, we're talking about the role serving plays in the development of our leadership. Nelson Mandela makes a fascinating comment about leaders and leadership when he says a leader is like a shepherd. He stays behind the flock, letting the most nimble go out ahead, whereupon the others follow, not realizing that all along they're being directed from behind. Well, God uses the same simile regarding leaders and shepherds throughout the scriptures. Not only are leaders often referred to as shepherds, but many of Israel's key biblical leaders actually served as shepherds. So, what is it about shepherds that makes them a good picture of leadership? Well, shepherds are always present, they provide, they protect, they nurture, and they guide their sheep. Foundational to each key component of a shepherd's job description is servanthood. The shepherd literally makes it their business to serve the sheep nearly 24/7, 365. Shepherds understand that if they take care of their sheep take care of them. So, shepherd leadership is synonymous with servant leadership. Jesus emphasized this repeatedly, telling his disciples that the world's leadership paradigm was upside down. Leaders aren't the ones being served, but the ones doing the serving. Listen to what he told them. It's not this way among you, but whoever wishes to be great among you should be the servant of all. That's in Matthew. And in the Gospel of Mark, he says almost exactly the same thing. He says, "But this is not to be the way among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be the servant of all." That's the Gospel of Mark. So what makes a good servant leader? King David wrote, "The Lord was his shepherd." David begins this description of God as his shepherd with this: "The Lord is my shepherd. Here it is, I shall not want." That means that he's not saying, I'm not going to ask for anything. It means that as I look around, everything has been provided. So, what does that reveal? Shepherds or servant leaders serve by being the ultimate provider. Pretty simple. Servant leaders know what their team needs to accomplish, and they ensure the needed resources are available to them. So consider this: what various tasks has Jesus given his followers? And consider what has he provided them. Now ask yourself, what various tasks have you given those you lead? And what are you providing them? You see, this gets pretty right down to the nitty gritty. So Jesus pointed out three key tasks of every servant leader in John chapter 10, where he talks about a good shepherd. Servant leaders are familiar with each member of their team, which develops relationship, community, and the gold standard, loyalty. Servant leaders protect their teams from internal and external enemies, such as distractions and something called mission slippage or mission drift. Servant leaders sacrifice to invest in their growth and the well being of their team members. So let's begin drilling down on these three key things. First, servant leaders know the members of their team. Solomon wrote, "Be sure you know the condition of your flock. Give careful attention to your herds, for riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations." That's Proverbs 27, verses 23 and 24. So, from what we know about Solomon, I don't think he ever worked as a shepherd. So, it's safe to assume he wasn't talking about sheep, but he was talking about people. Like shepherds, the servant leader needs to know the individuals on their team. What abilities, skills, and talents do they have? What are their capacities? How much can they handle? And what resources do they need to accomplish the task? This insight requires vigilance or presence. It allows servant leaders to observe the ebb and flow of a task and the resources needed to be effective. Knowing and caring for those you lead engenders a leader's most prized treasure, loyalty. So, what are some vigilance questions to ask? What phase is the project in? Are things on schedule? Has there been mission drift, or is the same goal still in sight? Have new or additional criteria been introduced? Do you have what you need to accomplish the goal? Does the team or an individual need emotional support? Is the team working cohesively as a team? And how can I pray for you or your family? Whoa, where did that come from? Well, personal influences often affect professional performance. I've discovered that a simple question of how's it going at home? How are you doing? How are the kids? How can I pray for you? Has really engendered an openness and kind of a camaraderie between the leader and the one being led. So, what's the second key task? It's protection. Jesus spoke of being the one who guards the gate or the one who is the gate that monitors what gets in and out of a shepherd's environment. Presence watches for what can harm the progress of a project or a goal. Is it something from the inside, like friction between team members, gossip, or a lack of focus? I've seen them all. Or is it something from the outside, an outside influence like another leader or a consultant who's confusing or sabotaging the goals or the plan? It's very important to be aware. What's the third key? The third key task of servant leaders is sacrifice, a sacrifice that invests in the growth and the abilities of the team and the team members. Servant leaders turn the principle of ROI upside down, another upside down. In business, ROI means return on investment. It's the world's model of making a personal investment to receive a personal return. Servant leadership reversed the ROI to IOR. Let me explain that. Servant leaders invest in others so they get the return. Let me say that again. Servant leaders actually invest in others so that they get the return. The greater the investment by the servant leader, the greater the sacrifice. It may require your time or your talents, and maybe even your money, or maybe even some personal gain. Yeah, I had a person by the name of Harry Disco, and he invested in me. He wanted me to become, he wanted me to take over his job ultimately as the operations officer of the studio where I worked. And he poured his knowledge into me over time like crazy. And he had me experience everything. And what happened? It was really about Harry in a way because he wanted to make sure that someone was able to take over his job so he could retire and know that the business was going to keep going on. So servant leaders like shepherds know that if they take care of their team, like me at that time, would take care of them, Harry. So servant leaders share attributes that are also valued by leaders in the world. Things like focus and perseverance, confidence, charisma, competence, and of course, a record of success. But servant leaders exhibit unique qualities of the soul that are very different from what the world looks at, like humility, patience, joy, kindness, goodness, mercy. Yeah, let me stop there. You know, servant leaders, shepherd leaders, don't default to fault finding, they default to fault fixing. That's mercy and generosity, gentleness, and self control. Servant leaders uniquely look like Jesus in order to act, serve, and sacrifice like Jesus. Jesus told his disciples, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many." That's Mark 10:45. So there's so much more that can be said, but let's finish with a few things to contemplate until our next episode. Where do you look most like Jesus? And where or when don't you look like Jesus? Find those things out. Is there someone in whom you can invest so that they can get a return? How much are you willing to sacrifice for them? And what would help you become a better servant leader? Yeah, think about those things. And one more quote that I want to give you. This is from Winston Churchill. He said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." So until our next episode, work in the light.